We are.
All right. Well, we are here this morning to hear a report by Advanced Energy to the Utilities Commission. Ms. Sanford, I'll ask you, if you would, to sort of set the stage for us.
Thank you. I will be glad to. And thank you for your attendance and your interest this morning. We appreciate it. We are very pleased to be here for our annual report to the Utilities Commission. And I think particularly so because it always comes at the same period of time that we have a nice dinner. So I hope that many of you were able to join and enjoy that last night. Joining me at the table today is Bob Goodson, who is the CEO of Advanced Energy. I'd like to introduce our board members, if I might. And I'll ask them to stand or raise their hands, those who are in attendance. Dion Delegati was with us remotely this morning, but is not here in the audience. Chris Edge, also not with us right now. Hayes Finley, Adam Foodman, thank you. Venu Ganta, thanks. Catherine Collins, Peter Ledford, Bob Powell, Paul Spruill, Galen Watson, Carl Wilkins, and our AE staff, ever important to the work of this organization, is represented by Donna Mayo, Amy Berenson, CeCe Maurer, David Farmer, Kelsey Green, and Dee Dee Fuller. So with that, and to give you a little preview of an announcement I'll make at the end, we've had elections. So we have new officers for this organization, and we will tell you who they are at the end of the presentation. But for now, we'll proceed into the presentation with our panel assembled.
I'll introduce
And
them,
Bob,
if that's okay.
take it away.
Yeah, thank you all for attending today, and we're really excited about presenting our annual report to you that we do every December. We have three speakers today aligned. The first will be David Farmer, who is our engineering supervisor. David's been with Advanced Energy for 3 years, but as you can tell, David is much more experienced than that. But David's been in the utility industry for 40 years, and we were real excited when we were able to recruit David 3 years ago from Pike Electric. Following David will be CeCe Maurer. CeCe is our longtime engineering manager, and will speak on our areas of supporting businesses. CeCe's been with Advanced Energy for 17 years. And then to wrap it up on our kind of summary annual report will be Brian Coble, who is our Chief Operating Officer. And Brian has been with Advanced Energy for 22 years. So we're excited today to provide you that input. And please ask any questions that you might have as we go through the presentations. So I'll open up with David.
Okay. Thank you for having us. It's an honor to speak to you today. I was going to give you an update on our activities in the renewables team at Advanced Energy. So I want to just get a little bit of an overview. Our main mission is to ensure the reliable and safe interconnection of renewable resources to the grid. Our team has done inspection and commissioning tests of distributed resources, both connected to the distribution system and now more recently on the transmission system. We'll talk a little bit about that. This includes both or all solar only, or a combination of solar and battery, or battery only. And in some cases, these sites, particularly the ones with solar and batteries, are used for microgrids. And we've done some renewable planning and feasibility studies. So as you can see, this table shows a little bit of an overview of the number of sites we've commissioned. We started this back in 2017 at full scale. If you remember back, if you were involved in those times, Duke Energy had noticed that there were some quality issues on their renewable sites. They wanted to make sure that they were installed as designed and as planned, and that they were of quality construction. So we began this program in full scale in 2017. So it's been going on about 7 or 8 years now. And we've done this throughout North and South Carolina, in both the DEP and DEC territories. and also with the North Carolina Electric Cooperatives. We've done a few sites with them as well. As you can see, we've commissioned almost 300 systems ranging from 1 to 16 megawatts and a total commission capacity of just a little over 1,200 megawatts now. So that's pretty significant. Also, that includes 14 battery energy storage systems with a range of 1 to 23 megawatt hours there. So we've done quite a bit in the last few years. This map here shows the location of those sites that we've commissioned since 2017. A little difficult to see, but the dots indicate a relative to the size. Most of the sites are in the 2 to 5 megawatt range, even though we said there was a 1 to 16 megawatt. Most of them are in the 2 to 5 megawatt range. But I think the key point about it is it shows the breadth of the territory that we've covered these past few years. So as you can see, all of the Carolinas, pretty much from the Tennessee state line up in the mountains all the way down to the Georgia state line in South Carolina. So we've covered quite a bit of ground in those 300 and some sites. And again, most of these are Duke Energy, connected to the Duke Energy system, but some are North Carolina cooperative sites as well. A little bit of a background without somewhat technical here, but the standard that governs interconnection to the grid is an IEEE standard 1547. It came out originally in 2003, so it's been around about 20 years. And at that time, solar really wasn't a big deal outside of maybe Hawaii and California. In this part of the country, most of what we were dealing with was cogeneration facilities that wanted to interconnect and sell power back to the grid. We had some hydro plants that were being developed along some of the rivers in the state, but there really wasn't a lot of renewables at the time. And in order to make sure the system was safe and reliable in those days, they said, basically, we don't want these sites actively regulating voltage. And if there's any kind of disturbance on the system, we want them to trip off as quickly as possible. We don't want them to continue to feed into a system fault or anything like that. And as renewables became more common and there was a lot more of it on the grid, utilities and the developers both said, look, we might want to do some of these things like regulate voltage. Why shouldn't we if we have the ability to do that? And why do we want to trip offline when we might need the site online? So in 2014, that standard was amended to say that it may regulate voltage and may ride through these abnormal conditions as long as the utility agrees to it. And ultimately in 2018, the current version of it says that at least these sites need to be capable of doing that. The utility, again, can decide not to, but it at least has to be capable of regulating voltage and riding through these abnormal events. So that has led us now, that was mostly distribution connected sites, which that map we showed earlier was all distribution connected at the 25 kV or 12 kV part of the system. We see a lot more activity now at the transmission level. And we refer to them now as IBRs, inverter-based resources, because it is not connected to a distribution system. But these are larger plants up to, and out in this area, up to 100 megawatts, but it could be even larger. In some parts of the country, they're even going to 200, 300, 400 megawatt plants. The standards have evolved around this, and actually there was no standard for transmission interconnection until last year, and that's the IEEE 2800 standard released in 2022. As that standard was released, we have provided some assistance to Duke Energy with developing their transmission interconnection process. How to work through the transition of that has been a big part of that. It's a phased approach. We also presented to the Dominion Energy staff back in April, provided a technical presentation about our activities in this area. And we also recently, just in the past month or so, have secured a project with TVA to assist them with their transmission connected resources. So this is a little bit of a, again, similar table to what you saw before, but this is related to our transmission interconnections. So as you can see right now, we're working with 9 active solar sites and 1 battery storage site. These range in size from 20 to almost 80 megawatts. Total capacity is a little over 400 megawatts. So as you can see, with just 9 sites, we're about a third of the way to the connected capacity that we had with, it took us 8 years of distribution sites. we are almost a third of the way there. Now, it's important to point out a couple of things. Our role is quite different. We're not just coming in at the end and doing an inspection and a test. We're actually involved throughout the process, which has been a great opportunity for us, and I think big help to our members. And we also are beginning to work in the Duke Energy Florida territory, and that's the first for us. Up to this point, it's all been DEP, DEC in the Carolinas, but we have some sites in the Florida territory now that we're working with. So going back to the distribution side, I'd mentioned the new standard does allow active power, active voltage regulation, ride-through capabilities, and so forth. And so it took the utilities a while to really embrace this and start utilizing the full functionality of that. Both Duke Energy and the cooperatives are beginning to look into using this advanced inverter functionality. These require power plant controllers, fairly complex control settings, and the testing is a little bit more complex. In the picture there, you can see this is one of the commissioning tests going on at one of these advanced inverter sites, where there's several tents lined up there, and there's a lot going on there. There's live testing taking place. There's constant communication with the utilities control center because we're varying the voltage on the system, and we want to make sure if there's any problems, they can respond quickly. So it's a little bit more involved, a little more complex. We're beginning to see a lot more of that. Also, we've seen some battery and battery storage. So our first battery storage commissioning was with Duke Energy at a Rock Hill site back in 2020. During the past couple of years, we commissioned 10 solar storage projects with NCEMC on the co-op system, 7 different co-ops. And 2 of those were actually microgrids, one being Duke Energy's Hot Springs microgrid way up in the mountains, and also Tideland EMC, Roseacre Farms in Hyde County, North Carolina, is a very important clean energy, renewable energy microgrid serving an egg farm in a fairly remote area of the state. That's at Tideland EMC again. Also, we have worked with large commercial and industrial clients as well. What you see here is a picture of a rooftop installation at a local pharmaceutical company in the RTP. In this case, there were 500 kilowatts of solar PV on the rooftop, combined with the 1 megawatt Tesla battery. Our role in this is a little bit different. It's not working with the utility in this case. This is an industrial customer. So we acted really as a commissioning agent, again, throughout the process, not just coming at the end. We did design reviews. We inspected the facility at various milestones, all to ensure compliance with the standards, and we did complete the final commissioning test. And that was successfully completed this year. And there is a new opportunity coming up with the same organization at a different but larger facility in the area, and we'll be working on that for the next few years. So we're really happy about that. So finally, just wanted to wrap up with some lessons learned and some of the challenges that we're still seeing in this area. This is an area where there's been a lot of turnover, personnel turnover, and that still remains a problem, attracting and retaining qualified personnel across the industry, but particularly on the developer community. And we're also continue to see some issues with construction quality and consistency, although that's gotten a lot better. I think our work with the developers over the years has had a big impact on improving and minimizing that, but there still are issues around that, partly tied back, I think, to the turnover of personnel as part of that as well. We're still seeing a lot of the sites fail the commissioning test, which requires a revisit. That requires some adjusting inverter settings and things like that. When we get into power plant controllers, these are very complex. And the industry as a whole is still learning a lot of the details about that. But the complexity of power plant controllers and the microgrid operating parameters continue to be an issue. And we're still seeing scheduling issues. Supply chain interruptions continue. It works itself out in one area and pops up in another. I think right now the biggest problem is getting transformers. You've probably heard Duke Energy and the utilities talk about this, but the long lead times of getting a step-up transformer for a site is sometimes holding up the process there. And just again, going back to the personnel issues, the construction resources, just the availability, having enough construction personnel to complete the sites that are in process right now. So that was all. If there was any questions, again, I appreciate the opportunity. I'll take a moment for any questions before I turn it over to CC.
Well, thank you, David. I have a question for you, then I'll see if any of the other commissioners have questions for you. The testing that you're doing, well, really two questions. I'm assuming the testing that you all are doing on the IBRs on the transmission side is for new sites. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Sites that have not yet gone into service. And so you're doing the work. And so on the distribution side, help me understand sort of the breakdown between the work that you all have done on sites that have already been placed into service by the time you get to them versus sites that you're doing the work at the front end.
Yeah, well, I didn't mention this, but there were so many sites that had not gone through this process. There was, I think, 323 is the number of uninspected or never went through this process. So we are working through that. It's a little bit different process there in that the developers are doing their own tests. It's a self-testing procedure and they are running that, but we are administering that program on behalf of Duke Energy. That's getting to there. But so from 2017 forward, these have all been sites that were completed and we inspected and commissioned prior to them going into service. Now, on the transmission side, again, we have the same thing. Some of them are already operating and there's a phased approach to that. So some of these sites that are already operating, they will have to deal with that as well. So there it is a phased approach, like I said. So some of the new sites that are getting their interconnection agreements signed from here going forward are going to have to go through this more detailed commissioning process. Some of the sites were too close to that, so they went ahead and allowed operation, but we have done some inspections of those as well.
Okay. One last question for you. The advanced inverter functionality, you touched on 1547. At this point in time, are there any systems within DEC or DEP that are actually consistent with or compliant with 1547? They have the functionality or capability of being compliant with?
Yeah, so they're just beginning that process now. So there are, I can't remember the number, but there are some sites that are going into process. We're still last year in the pilot phase of that, trying to figure out a way to make sure that there's a consistent process there. But we are beginning to see more of that. And what that will allow ultimately, there might be some situation where they'll go back and do that on some existing sites.
Okay.
But new sites going forward are going to certainly have that capability.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And let me see if there are any other questions for Commissioner Kimbright.
Thank you for your presentation. I just have two questions. You talked about the role is different for commissioning of at the end for the distributed connected solar facilities versus being involved around the process for the transmission. Can you just explain a little bit more about what the role is when you're involved throughout the process for transmission connected solar facilities?
Yes, that's a great question. We are doing design reviews. We are also reviewing inverter settings. In that case, looking at the power plant controller systems as well. We want to make sure we understand the operation of those because those get fairly complex. So before we even do any kind of inspection or walk down, we want to make sure we have a good understanding of how the site is supposed to be operating. And we have provided a lot of feedback through Duke Energy to the developers of some adjustments that need to be made there.
And then just one last question. You mentioned that some of the solar facilities that you inspected for commissioning have failed the initial.
Yes.
Kind of a ballpark of percentage that do not pass the commissioning test and have it be repeated.
Yeah, historically, it's been around 40% of them do fail. It's getting better. So some of the newer sites weren't failing as much, but and part of that is just gaining a better understanding and reviewing the settings prior to that test helps with that quite a bit. But it still is, currently it's still fairly high, but it's less than 40%. But that's kind of overall is about 40%, which is still pretty high.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Tucker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Farmer, again, thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of questions, and I had another life before this one in the legislature, so some of this comes from there. You mentioned, I think if I was correct, 100 or so sites in North Carolina that were 2 to 5 megawatt.
Yes, that was, well, that was, yeah, there was 300 sites that we've commissioned. Most of them are in that 2 to 5 megawatt range. I
Right.
don't know the exact number, but yes.
When I was there, Duke asked or mentioned all the time about the cost of the transmission lines for those sites that were so small, and that it was really offsetting the ability from a cost standpoint or return to put in the costly transmission lines to those 2 to 5 megawatt sites. Has that changed any?
Well, I think for the most part, these 2 to 5 megawatt sites are, that's all determined in the study process, right? So in my last job, we did the system impact studies, and a lot of times we would provide these high costs in order to comply, to make those comply. And a lot of the sites stayed in the queue or they weren't developed. It still is an issue. It's a little bit out of our scope in terms of what those decisions are. That's all determined on the front end on the study process. Our role has been more on the after the fact, going through that. So those decisions have already been made by the time we get there. But it is still an issue, is dealing with the cost of connecting these.
Are they, just as a follow-up, are they still required to run transmission lines to those small megawatt sites? Mandated, if you will?
Well, if you mean by transmission lines, if you're talking about the higher voltage, typically not. These
Okay.
sometimes often require upgrades to the distribution system to make them work, or they might build express distribution lines to them, which has a cost is passed on to the developer. But typically, if there's if it's required to extend a transmission line, most, at least the third-party developers would step
Okay.
out of that. It would be cost
Very well.
prohibitive to do it.
Quickly, you said the 300 sites. Have you commissioned those 300 sites?
Yes. those are
Okay.
the sites
Can you
that-
tell me how many solar panels are there in those 300 sites?
I really don't know, but
Really?
it's a lot. We don't actually inspect the panels. Our inspection is limited to the AC part of the
Okay.
system. So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's a lot of panels, and we could quickly figure that out, but it's quite a bit.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier that there were some 300 sites, 323
Mhm.
is a number I remember you
Yes.
stated that
Mhm.
did not go through your commissioning process.
Right.
When solar first came out, funding came from everywhere. It was kind of like the Wild West, and then tax credits and the whole deal. So I'm concerned that the developers were left up to their own devices to do their own testing. Was that, or do you know that their testing is or was as rigid as yours is? And is there any problems in the future for those 300 sites that did not be commissioned by you?
Well, you're right. They were put into service without that process. Duke was seeing quality problems, and Duke Energy saw some issues with that. So that's how we got into this in 2017. So the previously uninspected facility program, which is actually a program that's in operation now, where the developers are going back and doing those tests under our, we're administrating the program on behalf of Duke Energy.
Okay, so
And
those
that's-
300 sites will not be left to, as they
Right.
were, Duke's problem. They'll have
Correct.
your rigid commissioning schedule.
That is correct. They
Okay.
will have a commissioning process and inspection process they're going through. Yes.
Very well. Thank you, sir, for your answers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, any additional questions for Mr. Farmer? All right, well, thank you again, Mr. Farmer, for your comments today.
All right, thank you for your time this morning. I'm excited to present on behalf of Advanced Energy about how our staff is helping business and industry. One of the founding principles for Advanced Energy in 1980 was to moderate electric load growth. Since then, we've assisted businesses with programs to use energy efficiently and to manage their costs. In 2022, Advanced Energy worked with our board to develop bold ideas that will have big impacts for the state. Bold idea number one was to help industry and stakeholders meet decarbonization goals cost effectively. That's the bold idea I'm primarily expanding on today. David talked a lot about a bold idea number two. So the bold idea matches what we're hearing from businesses in the last few years. A lot of large companies out there have set aggressive energy and decarbonization goals. This really started with large international companies, but now we're seeing it across the board, even in small companies. Several have mentioned specifically that they have to report greenhouse gas emissions for supply chain requirements. For example, for products that are sold to Walmart or for parts that are going into Toyota vehicles. A lot of companies have targets that they need to meet in 2030, but they need assistance in the details to being able to track their goals. They're balancing their decarbonization goals with their other priorities in their business, which would be productivity, overall costs of operation, and then labor challenges. So for us, energy assessments are a starting point for our customers to work in their decarbonization journey. We're out in the field with customers to fully understand their challenges. So the pictures on the right show a couple of our team members in facilities in the field. Being in the field allows us to develop a relationship with both the facility staff and with corporate management at these organizations. During an on-site assessment, we're able to collect information about the processes and systems that are in these facilities so we can provide the most relevant recommendations to the decision makers. So this slide shows a handful of the industries that we've worked with in the past. As you can see from the pictures, we get familiar with a lot of different manufacturing processes and how things are made. This is really important because the top concern in manufacturing is getting product out the door, so they don't want to do projects that are going to affect uptime. And then I'll mention that it's also typical for us to work with commercial business customers in addition to manufacturing. So some of those are listed here, commercial real estate, healthcare, universities. And beyond that, we also do work with local governments and towns. This map shows customers that we've worked with in our on-site energy assessments over the last few years. Each dot represents a facility that we worked with, and the larger dots that show up on the map mean that there were 2 facilities in that city. We work in collaboration across all of our members with this work, and that would be Duke Energy, Dominion Energy, and the NC Electric cooperatives. So you can see our work takes us from the mountains to the coast, and it also takes us to a lot of our rural communities. In our rural communities, these industries that we work with are the core industry there, and they're the hub of these communities. So helping them stay competitive and relevant is really critical to the future of those communities. While we do a lot of work on site, I do want to mention that we do work through teleconference, of course, and through email inquiries. And this map only represents what we do in North Carolina, but we do work outside of the state. So the output of our energy assessments are recommendations that make sense for these businesses. We consider both energy efficiency and electrification. Some of the types of recommendations are listed on the slide, and there's a few pictures at the bottom. The bottom left 3 are a variable frequency drive, a compressed air leak that's been marked, and a heating and cooling system. The table on the right, it's probably not readable, but it's just representative of the summary that we would make for our customers with the recommendations, where we're going to show installed cost, savings, and payback. And then what's not included in that table, but is included in our reports now, are the carbon savings. So we've worked to really understand the carbon benefits from these projects and present them in a way to customers that help them with their goals. So some of these opportunities could be low or no cost. Several in the table that are listed are that. Other ones may require more significant capital. And what we're finding is that industries are very interested in reducing their on-site combustion. And that means that they are interested in electrification opportunities. We've always included electrification opportunities. So you may notice that there's a picture of some vehicles at the bottom. We have this year expanded our services to have a specific service offering around electric vehicle planning. So far, we're really seeing uptake in this with the towns and universities and local governments. In October, we went through a process with the DOE to get our assessments qualified to be used for eligibility for implementation grants for small and medium-sized businesses. And so if the businesses that we work with do qualify for that program, they will be eligible to apply for $300,000 in funding assistance. So we're going back now to find out which of our customers do qualify. And then last thing I'd like to say on this slide is that in 2022, our most recent year with data, the conservation measures that we recommended were able to save facilities annually more than 37 million kilowatt hours, $3.6 million, and 17,600 tons of carbon. So that's the equivalent of over 2,600 homes in North Carolina. So early on in my time working in the field, I found that the single most important thing to having a successful energy program was to have a dedicated energy manager and to also have a corporate commitment. So doing projects is really only part of the solution, and you really need to have a program to consistently achieve desired results over time. And so doing projects is represented on the left. Having a program is represented on the right. So if you're doing projects, if, like, for example, you installed a heating and cooling system, but you never changed the air filter or did any maintenance on it, then over time, you're not going to achieve the savings that's projected. Another example would be, it's pretty common in facilities to install a control system, but if you don't train the staff on how to use it, then they're not going to do the settings properly, and they're just going to bypass that equipment. So this is why we now help customers with continual improvement in what's called a strategic energy management program. So we base our strategic energy management program around the ISO 50001 standard. It's a voluntary energy management system standard. It's similar to other standards such as 9001 or 14001, which cover quality and environmental management. And those are ones that industries are familiar with. The ISO 50001 standard follows the model of Plan, Do, Check, Act. And what that means is it provides a framework for organizations to develop policies and targets, make data-driven decisions and implement solutions, measure their results, and then adjust their approach. So we found that some organizations will follow this standard solely for the benefits it provides in education. Other ones will decide to pursue certification to the 50001 standard. In between, there is a program that's run through the Department of Energy, and it's called 50001 Ready. And organizations can get their sites designated as 50001 Ready recognized. And a lot of our work has been around the 50001 Ready program. And one reason for that is because measuring results is required for the 50,001 Ready program. And for example, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab has done studies on this, and they've shown that after the implementation of an energy management system, such as 50,001 Ready, many organizations have seen energy intensity reductions of greater than 20%. And then the last thing I'd like to mention on this slide is that there's good overlap between tracking energy for 50,001 and what you would use to track your decarbonization goals. So there's a direct tie between 50,001 Ready and decarbonization goals for our clients. As far as what we've been doing on the 50,001 Ready program, we have been leading group trainings, and we call these cohorts. And this is a program that is free to the industries in North Carolina, and it involves an 8-month-long engagement. So we're using both local funding and we're using federal funding for these cohorts of trainings. Shown on this slide is just some of the local customers that have worked with us. If you look at the list of customers, it's a variety of industries. Some are large international companies, other ones are more regional. Of the ones that have participated in our cohorts, I've highlighted some in orange, and those are the ones which we've also gone on to help with getting their ISO 50001 certification or being designated as 50,001 Ready. So just to kind of talk about a couple of the customers, highlight them. We have worked with Daimler Trucks North America for years. They actually have 4 manufacturing plants in North Carolina, and that includes the familiar brand of Thomas Built buses, and all of their plants are certified. And then Grangees America may be a little less familiar, but they make aluminum products. And we worked with their plant in Salisbury to be certified, and then we've also expanded our work outside of the state to both Arkansas and Tennessee. And then the last company I'd like to highlight is our work with Eaton. And we've had some extended work with Eaton. They make both electrical, industrial, and aerospace products. They're actually North Carolina is actually the home to Eaton's largest United States employee base, with nearly 3,000 employees across 20 facilities. They've had multiple sites participate with us in our cohorts, and then we've gone on to help them with energy assessments. And through our ongoing conversations, we know that they've been acting on our recommendations and that they've also been doing the 50,001 Ready certification, 50,001 Ready and certifications. And then the last thing I'll mention on this slide, and it's not up on the slide, is that we have been working with cohorts through federal funding. So in all, in 2023, we have worked with 46 sites and 84 participants. And from our previous projects, 12 have gone on to do this 50,001 Ready recognition program. So I'm going to make a transition and talk about our motor lab and how we are also leveraging our motors and drives expertise in our work with business and industry. So motor-driven systems account for approximately 50% of all electricity generated in the world. This is what first attracted Advanced Energy to motors in the late 80s and to set up a motor test lab. And a picture of our staff is shown on the right in our motor testing lab. Our lab was first accredited to the NAVLAP accreditation in 1997. We do serve manufacturing customers around the world to test to national and international standards. Our hands-on experience from our lab allows us, from testing hundreds of motors, allows us to have expertise, which we can then leverage and bring to the businesses here. A lot of the energy efficiency measures that we recommend are based on motor-driven systems. So one of the most common recommendations that we make is to install variable frequency drives. For many applications, the payback on this type of measure is only a few years for customers. Picture on the right is a variable frequency drive, and then all the way on the right is a motor. So when it comes to the motor itself, facility managers often face the decision of whether to repair or replace a motor. It's usually more cost-effective to repair rather than replace a large motor. Repairing a motor actually does degrade its efficiency. Not long after we opened our lab, we developed the first quality repair program for motors. And now we perform quality program audits through the Electrical Apparatus Service Association, known as ESA. So ESA runs an accreditation program for motor repair shops. And this year we have worked with 3 local motor repair shops that are listed on this slide. So the ESA program helps make sure that every motor that's repaired maintains its efficiency. And so these repair shops that are repairing motors in our state are maintaining their efficiency for the customers in our state. And then this is my last slide, and I want to just mention that our testing capabilities do go well beyond efficiency in motors. And sometimes we do get called upon to help with power quality concerns. So when I say power quality concerns, these could be short duration outages or transient voltage events such as voltage sags that can't be avoided in utility operations. Sometimes the power quality problems are on the customer side of the meter. Either way, the motor-driven systems are usually affected by these events. And oftentimes there are things that customers can do on their side to mitigate the power quality problems. So I got a couple of examples. One was that a feed mill was experiencing failures of 600 horsepower motors. These are really large motors. I asked one of our employees for a scale of that, and he said it was about the size of a riding lawnmower, so a large motor. Picture of the failed motor is shown on the right. After we looked at the metering data, we found that the failures of these motors was not caused from incoming power from the utility. And we went through a few different recommendations, but just to mention a couple, we gave them solutions to adjust their motor starting practices, their motor type specifications, and their motor storage practices. Another example from a customer was a sawmill customer, and they had some equipment that was particularly sensitive to voltage sags, and they also were looking to expand their operations. In this case, again, we had multiple recommendations, but a couple of examples are that we recommended updating the motor starter equipment and installing capacitor banks. So that's 2 examples from the field. And then coming back to the lab, sometimes it's very difficult to test customer solutions in the field. So we'll actually reproduce real world conditions in the lab to be able to figure out whether products are going to be able to mitigate the customer problems and perform as expected when they're put in the field. And then the last thing that I'm going to mention on this slide is that we do work with companies to do validation and testing for new product development. And this year in particular, we've had 2 companies that we worked with out of Charlotte. And one of those was in partnership with the EPIC Center at UNC Charlotte. So that's what I have. You can see our staff is out there working on a variety of challenges with business customers. And we're helping these customers in managing their energy and their decarbonization journey, while also helping them with some of their operational decisions. We're continually updating our services to better serve their needs, and we're also continuing to form long-term relationships to really sustain the energy management practices over time. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mauer. A few questions for you, and then I'll see if the commissioners have questions for you. First of all, I always enjoy hearing about the work that you all are doing on this front, particularly with customers in North Carolina. It's very impressive, and it can be helpful to the electric system here in a way that benefits us all. You made the comment when talking about the energy efficiency work that you all are doing, that you're seeing many customers or clients who are wanting to move away from combustion on site. That makes sense sort of in light of, kind of widespread now corporate goals for carbon reduction, et cetera. But as you all are seeing clients move in this direction, electrify transportation, as you discussed, or heating, or other aspects of process, are you all monitoring electricity usage? I mean, you reported on I think it was gigawatt hours avoided based on the work that y'all have done. Does that include those cases where you see clients moving in the direction of electrification? And I guess really what I'm wondering is, are we going to see ultimately an increase in electricity usage by those customers who are no longer using other types of fuel?
Yes, so in the case of doing an electrification project, absolutely, it's going to increase the electricity use by those customers. I know that we would be taking into account the carbon savings. I'd have to check on how we show, the increase in electricity versus the reduction in therms. But I'm fairly certain that's all reported out in our reports. And I do want to mention that these electrification upgrades, they do take a while to plan for some of these bigger things. They're going to require infrastructure and could cost quite a bit. So, some of the ones that we are making now really are around like heat pumps. And we're doing more of, educating the customers about what they're going to need for doing things like electric boilers or a more intensive project like process heating.
Okay. That makes sense. And so do I understand you then to mean that these like electrification of transportation for a big customer, you all might be saying at this point, here's what the infrastructure need would be were you to go in this direction.
Yes.
Okay. As you all are providing this service, at this point in time, are you considering sort of the net effect there on, if we are increasing electricity usage, considering what effect that is going to have on, for example, the electric system and CO2 emitted by the electric system?
And our electric vehicle planning service in particular, it's really a 3 to 5 year plan. But yeah, we do present to customers, what it will take, what it will happen in the future to their electricity needs. And that's something we educate them on, that it's going to increase their carbon.
Okay. That's good to hear. And so is there a focus yet on, if we're going to electrify this, it's going to increase your carbon, so we're going to do something else over here to reduce your energy usage?
Right. And that, that's part of why it's important to take a holistic view, and why we look at things like we are educating ourselves on greenhouse gas accounting, and making sure that, as you're shifting things, your overall footprint is going down.
Okay. You got to where I wanted you to. So thank you. All right. Any additional questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Duffley.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned how you were working with customers in state and out of state. Could you kind of give me a percentage breakdown on in state versus out of state?
For our energy assessment type customers, I would say 90 to 95% are in state, but we're starting to expand more out of state.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I appreciate your presentation as well. It's very informative. At one point, you touched upon a $300,000 grant program. Could you explain a little bit more about that, the eligibility requirements, how that works, and how you disseminate information to those that might be eligible recipients?
Yeah, so what I know about it is, it's a federal grant program, and we're still working to understand the eligibility, but there's certain employee restrictions, revenue restrictions on the size of the business. And what we've done is when these customers apply for the grant, they have to have done an assessment by a qualified provider. So what we've done is get our assessments qualified under that program. The customers themselves are the ones who have to apply for it. We can't apply on their behalf, as I understand it right now.
That makes sense. Yes.
But this is a very recent development for us, so I
Sure.
think we got qualified in late October. So we're still learning, and yes, we're gonna have to do some education to the customers about the program.
Yeah, well, yeah, it just sounded intriguing. That's what I was trying to get a little bit more information. So I appreciate that. And you guys keep us informed about updates. And I know you have your meetings, I guess they're quarterly, so I'll be listening in virtually to see if you might touch upon that in one of your future reports.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Hughes.
Yes, could you comment a little bit on how your program interacts or coordinates with some of the the more typical utility run programs? Specifically, Duke's had some issues with opt-out, and I'm just wondering if you have any kind of statistics on, whether the utilities, the businesses you work with are kind of opted out Duke Utilities, or they've also have access to the utility funded programs.
Yeah, so my understanding is that a lot of the facilities that we work with are opted out of the programs. But I can check and get, numbers if you'd like that. If they are in the program, we do educate them about the incentives available, and either way, we, do show them what the incentives would be available. So, we've done things like help with the opt-in, opt-out decisions based on the projects that are available.
So you've had some nice statistics on kind of energy saved and impact. Do you have that, or would that be available on an opt-out versus opt-in basis? What percentage of those utilities are?
I can check on that.
Yeah, I'd be really curious about that.
All right, well, thank you for your comments, Ms. Maurer. All right, Brian, you're up.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Hope you're well. I am wrapping things up by actually going through our physical report for you all. Each of you should have a copy. And before I get going, I want to be respectful of time. Is there a hard stop at 12? Okay. Thank you very much. And always thankful for your time. It's a pleasure to be here going through Advanced Energy's accomplishments for the year. Again, we produce this each year and present it each year in December. And it helps show what we've accomplished, what we've been through the year. Obviously, Cece and David have covered a lot of what's in the annual report. So I'm going to hit the highlights that they did not cover and just walk through it with you. For example, the first section covers decarbonization and our support with businesses. Again, Cece's covered that really well. So I'm going to skip forward to section or page 5, which is supporting North Carolina's local communities and governments. And here I wanted to highlight that we've seen growing demand from municipalities for electric vehicle charging station planning, solar feasibility studies, and in general, energy-related technical assistance. And so we are wrapping up a project currently with Holly Springs to project and predict their future fleet charging needs. And for the town of Chapel Hill, we're wrapping up another project where we developed criteria that will guide developers of parking decks and multifamily buildings on the amount of charging stations they may need today and in the future. In both of those cases, we're finding ourselves working and actually saving money for the towns by encouraging them to focus on sizing infrastructure to what they need today, and then building flexibility into their structures for the future through raceways and conduits Essentially, don't overinvest today, but make it flexible and easy to grow your network of charging stations into the future. We've also been active at the state level with state government. We've provided technical support during the development of the Department of Transportation's state plan for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. We partnered with the North Carolina Electric Cooperatives and NCDOT on a proposal to deploy battery-supported charging stations in rural North Carolina. And in addition, we've continued our work with low to moderate income households, which you all know is very important to us. In partnership with the state of North Carolina, we've submitted 2 proposals. The first opportunity is to increase Advanced Energy's role in serving the weatherization program in the state. Here, we would be a sub-grantee to the state potentially, if we were to win, for nearly a third of the state, kind of the center of North Carolina. A second opportunity was to join the Energize North Carolina consortium that the state used and formed to answer the Solar for All program. So in this case, if we win, we should find out mid-2024, we would put solar energy on those households that are least likely to be able to afford it. That also includes roof replacement and upgrades. And in our report, we highlight our decades-long partnership with Habitat for Humanity. They've been a cornerstone group for us in addressing energy burdens for low-income households. And both state initiatives would allow us to grow that relationship with the affiliates of North Carolina. There are currently 67 in the state, and also work with other nonprofit organizations that are really important to solving this issue. I'll pause there for a second to see if there are any questions. Okay. Next, I'll move to emerging technologies for electric utilities. Here, I'd like to
Brian, before you go there, I do have a question. I didn't know if
Okay.
you were going to hit this or not. The reference to the multi-year research study with Duke to explore winter peak demand in manufactured housing.
Mhm.
Where can I find information about that?
It would probably be best at this point for us to have a meeting with you.
Okay.
And we'd be happy to schedule
Okay.
that at the turn of the year.
All right. We'll
Okay.
get that done.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
As far as other research that's underway, thank you, Cece. Applied research is extremely important, especially with the development of new technologies and the speed that new technologies are coming out. This year, our research included the potential for school buses to provide power back to the grid when it's needed. We are working with Duke Energy to schedule and discharge energy from school bus batteries back to the grid when peak demand is high, while ensuring the bus is available to run its route. Through this research, we have confirmed that buses do have surplus battery capacity after completing their routes, and this shows potential for their use in demand response programs in the future. Our technical research on smart thermostats and other technologies that control peak demand at homes is also continued, and we've expanded our use of modeling to determine how different technologies may be used together for demand management. Increasing our use of modeling software has helped us provide insights more quickly and is an area of ongoing development for us as we try to get answers out to keep up with the pace of new technologies. And again, CC covered improving electric motor efficiency very well. She and David, of course, covered ensuring renewable interconnections remain safe and reliable. So if there's no discussion there, I will move to the section titled The Next Generation of Energy Leaders. And here I would like to highlight our work through North Carolina Green Power. And this year is our 20-year anniversary for Green Power. And for those of you who are flipping through, that's page 15. So the origins of Green Power, North Carolina Green Power, date back to 1997. And when the Study Commission on the Future of Electric Service in North Carolina asked the North Carolina Utilities Commission to examine the potential for a voluntary green power checkoff program. The North Carolina Utilities Commission asked Advanced Energy to hold stakeholder meetings to develop the program. And then in 2002, Advanced Energy, along with the support of the electric utilities of the state, sent a proposal for a program to the Utilities Commission, which was approved in January of 2003. And that led to the development of and creation of Green Power as an organization in October of 2003. Today, North Carolina Green Power's mission is to expand public knowledge and acceptance of clean energy technologies in North Carolina. We provide curriculum and demonstration projects to the state's K through 12 schools by partnering with educators and teachers. In 2023, North Carolina Green Power installed 14 solar demonstration projects and provided curriculum and training to 58 teachers in the state. Since 2015, we've impacted 86 schools in 46 counties, and we strive to reach all 100 counties. So I would like to thank the ongoing support of the Utilities Commission on the Green Power Program and Advanced Energy also, of course. And with that, I close my comments and happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Brian. Let me see if there are questions. Go ahead, Commissioner Duffley.
Moving back to page 9 of your presentation, you were discussing the emerging technologies, and I heard demand response and school bus batteries. So it sounds like it's mainly on the distribution grid. And so I was just wondering about grid enhancing technologies or GETs. Are you going to move into that type of research as well, or mainly stay on the distribution grid?
I may see if Cece or David. David, do you have a?
Well, I think our activity on the transmission grid is mainly focused on the trend toward larger renewable facilities interconnecting with the transmission system. As far as grid enhancing technologies, that gets into the power plant controllers and things like that can provide services to the grid as needed, not just selling energy. That's really about all I could say about that. But there are a lot of areas, I think, a lot of interesting technologies coming out, and we are doing everything we can to stay on top of all that.
Thank you. And then my second question is on page 5. You were talking about infrastructure, working with towns, with parking decks, and thinking about the infrastructure that they need today versus the future. And you were giving them ideas to remain flexible for the future. I just want to know what that looks like, boots on the ground, if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Happy to. It's a combination of installing charging stations today to meet your current needs, but also in the construction process, designing where future charging stations would go, running open conduits or raceways for future electrical needs, but not installing those technologies yet. So it's kind of, we see it as the best of both worlds. You're meeting your needs today, but then making sure that any upgrade costs are minimized in the future as the need for electric charging grows. And we believe that saves hundreds of thousands of dollars in investment in today's technology that could be obsolete in 5-10 years, but also in reduced upgrade costs in the future when you see you do need more infrastructure.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let me follow up on Commissioner Duffley's question first. In terms of that infrastructure planning, I mean, how is that being conducted? I mean, are you being called in to your unique expertise? Are you relying upon others to kind of help with those efforts? I mean, how would a community reach out to Advanced Energy to engage them on this type of project?
Yes, thank you for the question. And that is the service we are providing. And we can help at various levels, from working with a group, whether it's a community, a business, a municipality, to first look at what's the likely growth in their area of electric vehicles. What are their plans for transitioning their fleet, for instance, to electric vehicle? And then what's the plan around charging those vehicles as they come on? And we try to meet the customer where they are. So it may be that we're helping to actually design what a parking lot looks like, where those stations go, what stations you install today, what stations you put infrastructure in to install in 10 years based on projections. In the case of Chapel Hill, it's more of overall guidance for this many parking spots in a lot. You should assume, this many charging stations today and, this many, a percentage of this much, 25% or 20%, I think in their case, for 10 years out. So it's varied in the need that we see, but it's all trying to get to how do we help design practical approaches to the growth of that infrastructure.
Yeah, well, I commend you. I think that's a very excellent resource to be able to provide and, insights as it relates to that. And one other thing I saw on page 6 of your report talked about, working with the North Carolina Electrical Cooperatives and NCDOT to do these DC fast chargers in 2 rural locations. I mean, are there plans to continue working with them in doing other charging stations in rural areas? I mean, how is that looking? I mean, 2 is good because the rural areas are devoid. So, I mean, but I'm trying to see to the extent to which there are perhaps plans to go further with that type of project.
Yeah, I think there's always interest when, there's an alignment in the funding that's available. And I think the electric co-ops have done a great job of putting plans in place to take electric charging to rural areas. And of course, you go through co-op territory to get to a lot of the vacation spots that we'd like to go to. So there's a great need for it in the state and for emergency planning. From my perspective, it's more opportunistic at this point. And, when is there federal funding or some other funding that may allow us to expand that network? That's what I'm currently seeing.
Okay, very good. Thank you for those insights. And by the way, it's a nice product you guys came up with, this little report. It's very informative, and the pictures, the narrative. Whoever worked on this did a great job.
We have a great communications team. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Kimmerer.
Good morning. I just have one question on page 9. I think I was particularly interested in your study about vehicle to grid for the school buses. And I thought that was particularly interesting. Duke has its pilot program for, and Duke Energy Carolinas for its Ford 150 truck to study kind of that vehicle to grid situation as well. It says here that it's going to be a multi-year study. Where are you are you at the beginning stages of it, or where are you with that multi-year study?
CC will help me with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a multi-year study. We have done some of the testing with one bus that's out of state, and we are just starting the testing on 2 buses right now. I think, like, as we speak, I think we're doing a test of one of the buses. So, it's really just rolling out. We've got a lot of learnings. And yeah, I think it's going really well. I think that program also has had some extensions on it. And a lot of it was around supply chain of the buses themselves. But it's really getting moving now.
So is the bus that you're testing now in North Carolina?
Yes.
Okay.
One is with the Eastern Band of Cherokee, and the other one is in Durham.
Okay, got it.
Now.
Okay, thank you. All right, any additional questions before we wrap it up? All right, Commissioner Tucker.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, I'm pleased to see that you are taking the approach to have towns put in electrification charging stations as their need is today. As I read, I'm well aware that some EV companies or automakers are going belly up. the expense and overruns of EVs. And I have a friend who has a high-end car dealership in Charlotte. He has 42 on his lot and can't give them away. I think the people that are green 2.0 have bought those cars, and those people that can afford them, because they're really, really expensive. And I see where Tesla's cut their price as well. So there's some transition going on in the marketplace. So to go put in a ton of charging stations, we don't know what 5 years is going to bring, or 3 years is going to bring, or tomorrow for that matter. Just making that comment, but thank you for your presentation. Most of the time when I see an annual report, I see financials behind that annual report. I don't see that here. Mr. Goodson and I renewed relationships, excuse me, last night over a number of years. We had worked together some years ago, and he was very forthcoming in saying that approximately 10% of your revenue comes from the testing that you, excuse me, $10 million of your revenue comes from the testing that's done in your facilities, which is a great revenue stream. And then there, he mentioned another 5 million come from somewhere else. Can you give me an overview? Because when I can look at where the money comes from, I can look at the mission statement of the organization and see if they are following with the revenue stream and what their goals are, and I can better tell what they're about. So if you can share that with me. I think your total budget may be around 20 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a little less than that, and I'm happy to share that with you. And by the way, we file our audited financials with the commission June of each year. So,
Okay.
you know, we do have those filed with you as well. Our annual revenue is approximately $8 million currently. Nearly half of that, a little less than half of that, is made up from our relationship with the utilities in the state. And the other 4 million or so is from fee for service, very much like a standard engineering firm. We do quite a bit of work in federal government, state government, and that helps make up that other 4 million.
Okay, so it is 8 million. I misheard him.
It is, yes, 8 million.
8 million, okay. For a total budget for all the operations that you do. With what you could do, it should be more than that. And with the expertise that you have within your group of people, folks that work with you, it could be more than that.
I agree.
And just as a note for the commission, and I'll be quiet, I toured a $560 million plant here with Commissioner Brawley probably 2 weeks ago, and they were in the foundry business, and they were using electric furnaces and not natural gas. And I found that to be amazing that they were using electric furnaces to heat metals. So electrification, as long as a grid can handle it, I think the chair's question about how expansive it's going to be on the grid as industries do try to go to electrification, we better be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner McKissick.
Just one quick follow-up, and that's this. In you doing your analysis relating to vehicle to grid, I would appreciate it if it may be already on your checklist of things to consider, is understanding the degree to which the batteries degrade in that process. Because from what I gather from information I've learned from what's taking place out in California, more specifically Los Angeles, they are experiencing, in some instances, significant degrading of the battery over relatively short periods of time. But it does seem to be manufacturer specific. So it would be, you know, it's great to have that capacity, but if you're degrading that battery and it's going to shorten the life, you know, you need to be aware of it. You need to know and understand those particular attributes. So, you know, it's probably already among those things that your analysts and experts are considering, but it's good to know that at the end of the day, you not just have the capacity to do it, but it may not be cost effective if it doesn't do it wisely. So that's what I'm trying to learn more about. Thank you.
All right, with that, I believe we are at the end of our agenda. Any final words for the commission?
Very quickly, yes. Thank you very much for your interest and your participation this morning. It's a really good session, and we appreciate it. Some people matters. somehow inexplicably, I failed to recognize Vicki McCann, the Business Development Director, and Brian Coble as members of the staff who were here. I think they're so well known, I just assumed it, so, and I'm sure you did as well, but I want to say their names in the room. They are obviously very, very valuable members of this great staff. I want to announce the results of an election this morning. We have had our annual election and we have changes, and there are wonderful changes. Bob Powell will be the new chair effective immediately. And Bob is formerly associate professor at NC A&T State University. So he has been the vice chair. He will now be the chair. Chris Edge of Duke. After all these years, I still have trouble with the transition. Chris Edge, VP of Large Business Customers for Duke Energy, will be the vice chair. Catherine Collins is moving from treasurer to secretary. Catherine is the president of the Southeastern Wind Coalition. Carl Wilkins is going to be our new treasurer, taking over from Catherine, and he is the VP of Distribution and Asset Operations for Quanta Technology. And Dion Delegati is going to be the member at large on the board. Dion is Associate VP of Community Engagement with the Environmental Defense Fund. So those are the changes in the officer lineup here. We greatly appreciate these folks stepping up to do this good work. And again, we thank you for your time this morning.
All right, well, thank you for that information, Ms. Sanford, and thank you for letting us know the changes in the board. We appreciate the service of those board members or board member who are outgoing, and look forward to hearing from those of you who have assumed new positions. So again, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate hearing from you all and learning more about what you're doing. With that, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Um,